My name is Barbara Klein, and I am going to be speaking to you about Fort Collins native Ruth Burnett McDonald. Throughout her almost 100-year life, Ruth always made time for music. Ruth had deep pioneer roots in Fort Collins and Larimer County. Ruth's paternal grandparents, Benjamin Burnett and Clara Drusilla McGrew, were both born in Illinois. After serving as a captain of Company C, 148th Illinois Volunteer Infantry in the Civil War, Burnett moved his family to Fort Collins in the fall of 1879. He had a mercantile business initially, but later he was a prospector and miner at Lulu, Teller, Manhattan, and other mining camps. Later he moved his family to Denver, and they lived much of their lives there. In the fall of 1922, Benjamin and Clara went to San Diego to spend winter in a milder climate. They both became ill and died within 5 days of each other. This slide includes an advertisement for B.F. Burnett, real estate, insurance, and mining broker. The news article says that he was encouraged by the mine at Lone Pine. Here, Benjamin Burnett and friends are in front of the Burnett Mercantile Store in Fort Collins. This is the Burnett family. In the articles, we see that son Frank came down from Manhattan with 200 pounds of ore that he sent on to Denver. His siblings, Lulu and Arthur, came to visit, and Arthur went to stay at the Rustic, their family's cottage. On Ruth's maternal side of the family, the Dennebecks were involved in the barbershop business. Also, Charles Dennebeck ran different cafes and lunchrooms in Fort Collins. The group photo of the Dennebeck family shows Ruth in the center behind the little boy in the white shirt. This is Ruth's grandmother, Elizabeth Dennebeck, and Ruth's mother with her two sisters, Minnie and Effie. Gertrude is the one in the center. After a short courtship, Ruth's parents, Frank Burnett and Gertrude Dennebeck, married on Valentine's Day, 1905. These photos show handsome young people and their marriage license. The article states that the long expected has happened at last. On December 8, 1905, Ruth Pauline Burnett was born. Unfortunately, the local newspaper announced that an 8-pound boy was born to Mr. and Mrs. Frank Burnett. By the next month, the reporters got the gender correct when they reported that Gertrude and daughter Ruth returned from visiting friends in Denver. Evidently, the attentive husband had a 4-course meal waiting for their return, but they had a 2-hour delay in arriving. For a man waiting impatiently for his wife and dinner to receive a telephone message from Denver that she hadn't even started was disconcerting, to say the least. It is not on record what he said as he hung up the receiver. Little Ruth had a busy social calendar, including her 5th birthday celebration and parties given for her little friends. Her Burnett grandparents visited from Denver, with Grandpa leaving to start a job as general manager at the Manhattan Placer Quartz Mining Company. As Ruth became a teenager, her social life continued. She was in charge of the scripture lesson at the Queen Esther Mission of the Methodist Church and attended lawn parties and dances hosted by her friends. When Ruth was 16, her father won election as Larimer County Clerk and served for 4 years. Other elected positions were Deputy County Clerk and Recorder. Later, he worked in the insurance department at Security Abstract and Investment Company in Fort Collins. Ruth continued to be popular and busy. She was one of the first 2 girls nominated for Larimer County Princess at the Industrial Princess Review. Margaret Ziegler won. She was a model in a style show, host to out-of-town guests, and attended the big rivalry game of the Aggies and the Buffs. The state dry goods store invited men to come in for a special night of Christmas shopping just for them. Ruth dressed in Spanish costume and handed out cigars and cigarettes. These images show Ruth Burnett in the 1924 Fort Collins High School Lambkin yearbook. Funny that I had almost the same hairdo in my freshman year of high school. Ruth started taking piano lessons at age 5. At age 12, she took voice lessons and studied dance and ballet. By 1928, she was teaching dance lessons at the Montrose Graham Studios in Fort Collins and Loveland. As a young lady, Ruth tried out for the role of Josephine in HMS Pinafore in Denver and received the part. This started a lifetime in opera and light opera. In December 1928, Ruth's father took her to Phoenix to study at a music school. 3 months later, her father returned to Fort Collins, but Ruth stayed behind to continue her schooling. The photograph shows Ruth with her mother and 2 brothers, Benjamin and Raymond. While Ruth was in Arizona, a notice in the Fort Collins paper announced the divorce of her parents with charges of cruelty. While Ruth was in Phoenix, she attended the Arizona School of Music and studied under Madame Bertha Ridgway. During her short 6 months in Arizona, she was a popular vocalist with organizations like the Harmony Club in Phoenix. In May 1929, Ruth was chosen to play the lead female role of Mary in a George M. Cohan musical of the same name at the Orpheum Theater. The 2 presentations benefited the Brophy College in Phoenix. In her oral history interview, Ruth said that George M. Cohan sent a telegram asking that she come to New York to work with him. Her father thought it was too far away. Ruth always regretted that decision. In February 1929, Ruth performed as a soloist at the opening of the Arizona Biltmore Hotel in Phoenix. It was a high point in her career. The news photos show the changing times, airplanes and automobiles. While she studied at the music school, Ruth took classes in language and voice at the University of Arizona in Tucson. She continued to sing at events in Arizona. She sang to ovations at the Phoenix Lions Club for the Legionnaires in Phoenix to honor war veterans, and she presented a recital that included a number from Madame Butterfly. When she returned to Fort Collins, Ruth continued to perform in different venues. Her social life was busy too. Work in opera and theater was difficult to find during the Great Depression. Nobody was buying tickets and opera houses were going bankrupt. Ruth was a soloist at St. Barnabas Episcopal Church in Denver and worked in the Dorothy Douglas dress shop. She modeled for Gano Downs and Daniels and Fisher in Denver and was paid to take style shows to the Denver Press Club, Petroleum Club, and the Brown Palace Hotel. By the 1930s, Ruth was studying at the Denver College of Music under the direction of Professor John C. Wilcox. She also took classes at the University of Colorado at Boulder. During her career, Ruth sang in English, French, Italian, Russian, Spanish, and German. Operas included Madame Butterfly, Carmen, and Rigoletto at the Tabor Theater in Denver. She also sang in light operas such as Kiss Me Kate and South Pacific. Ruth also sang on the radio. These notices tell of Ruth singing on KLZ radio in Denver. Ruth liked singing at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park. In 1930, Ruth visited Estes Park with her brother Ray and friends. She also entered the Atwater Kent vocal contest in Denver. Ruth met a young man in Denver named Lynn William Bryce. After a short courtship, they were married on May 7, 1931, at the Burnett home in Fort Collins. Their marriage ended in divorce in April 1935. But before the marriage ended, they were blessed with the birth of Billy Jr. on December 24, 1932. Billy got to visit Santa Claus at the invitation of the Gates Rubber Company in Denver, where his mother worked at the time. It is interesting that Ruth and Lynn Rice remarried on January 18, 1936, but again their marriage ended in divorce in December 1939. Ruth was a very popular wedding singer. These articles tell of her solos for her cousins, Esther and Joan Dennebeck's weddings, and Brother Ben's wedding in Wyoming. On February 11, 1942, Ruth married Robert F. McDonald in Mesa, Colorado. She then performed as Ruth Burnett McDonald. Mr. McDonald was a partner in McDonald's Investment Company in Denver. In addition to Denver and Fort Collins, Ruth would sing in the Mesa area, including a recital at Mesa College. Robert McDonald was active in the Masons and Shriners. As his wife, Ruth was a Daughter of the Nile and performed at the Denver, Salt Lake City, and Detroit Shriners conventions. Ruth was also a member of the Steinway Music Club in Denver. In the 1950s, Ruth worked in musical therapy for handicapped children. This thank you letter is for a performance at the Shriners Hospital in Salt Lake City. Ruth continued to use her musical talents in later years. She was head of music for the Poudre Canyon Chapel and sang in Red Feather Lakes. She offered singing lessons for children and adults and ran the Chalet Store gift shop on Poudre Canyon Road. Ruth produced musicals in Fort Collins. In December 1976, she directed the musical Ballad of Baby Doe. She sang Augustus' aria for the production. Her parents actually knew Baby Doe Tabor, and Ruth played the lead role in the musical during her younger years. Ruth had an idea for a community gala and helped with the production at Rocky Mountain High School in 1977. The gala was to raise money for scholarships. There were other galas at the Lincoln Center. Son Bill Rice attended the military academy, married, and was blessed with 4 children: Mark, twins Peter and Mara, and Mindy Rice. Before she died, Ruth also had 1 great-grandchild, Andrew. In January 1968, Ruth's divorce from Robert McDonald was recorded. Her personal life is mysterious. This San Jose registry shows that Ruth married Floyd Hutchins in December 1972, but Ruth continued to use the name Ruth McDonald until her death. Ruth's father, Frank, moved to the San Diego, Chula Vista area of California. At the age of 92 years old, he wrote Golden Moments in Colorado about his early memories of the Fort Collins area. Here is a collage of Burnett family photographs and a photograph of Ruth with her father and brothers in 1955. Her mother, Gertrude, died in Fort Collins in 1957. Her father died in California in 1968. Brother Ray passed away in the Poudre Canyon in 1971, and brother Ben in 1997 in Wyoming. Ruth herself lived just 2 months shy of her 100th birthday. I hope you enjoyed this story of a remarkable Fort Collins woman, Ruth McDonald, and her gift of music. Thank you.